Last video in the video series, guys. We are finishing the Strega in this video. We're gonna do all the final steps. We're gonna test run this engine, get the plane CG'd, get it all assembled. It's gonna be a good one. Stick around, let's dive in. Last video, we finished off kind of with the canopy and gluing the startup tray in. So we're gonna flip this plane back over, I think, and we're gonna continue working on that stuff. I'm gonna pop the canopy off, get all of our magnets off. We will continue with our organizing. All right, so now that we've got all of our kind of engine stuff figured out, we're gonna start working on the scale bits on the front and our spinner and everything. So first thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna work on the exhaust. Now they are marked left and right pieces, so these pair go together. So first thing we need to do, we're gonna take our Dremel bit and we're gonna open up each of these holes just in the marked area. The one that is at the back here with the L, that's gonna be the one that's actually opened up the most for the scale exhaust. But we'll just, as a first step, open each of these guys up, and we'll also open up each of the ends just to make it look proper. All right, so we've got our exhaust, our scale exhaust bits kind of roughly assembled here. We did all of our holes, put the other pieces through. I just tack welded them in place with some CA. Now, these don't just go tight to the outside. They're kind of spaced off a little bit. So we want to add some spacers to the edges here of the scale exhaust pieces. And I think we're going to use wood that came in the kit. So we'll just put probably 4 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and get those glued to the side. And those will allow us to sand them down and adjust the position against the openings here. So you kind of want them spaced off a little bit like that. That's how the scale plane looks, or the full scale plane looks. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So we got our spacers attached to our scale exhaust. Now what we have to do is we got to sand these spacers down. They're too tall. So I'm going to take my Dremel, sand these guys down, and it's pretty much a custom fit for each side, each position. So it's just one of those things you play with, test until it's done right. All right, so we've got the scale exhaust pieces kind of just tacked in place with some CA from the inside. Now we have to do a little bit of sanding on the inside pieces, but before I go too crazy on sanding this stuff down, I want to get this all glued in place. So one of these front pieces here is touching the starter motor, preventing this from going all the way on. So I'm going to get these high soled in place, and then we'll come back afterwards and we'll start sanding down all the stuff, right, that's kind of interfering with our setting of this up. All right, so while we're waiting for the exhaust to finish curing, we are going to move on to the nose cone. Now the nose cone is carbon. It is not set up for any props, so we have to do all of this manually. So we've got a template made here. I just took a piece of the jetty box and just did it slow and steady. So I kind of made a general shape, and then I just kept cutting it out sliver by sliver with an X-Acto knife, and I think I'm happy with that shape right there. I think that'll work good. I've got a bit of an angle to compensate for the cone. So happy with that shape, that is good. Now what we need to do is we need to transfer this to the nose cone. Now that's the challenge. All right, so it's actually pretty simple. We took the cone, stuck it on a piece of paper, and traced around the cone. And then what you do is you fold the paper in half, looking at the 2 circles or half circles, making sure they line up perfectly. And then we took that crease, put our ruler across, drew a line, and then we folded it the other direction, making sure the circle and line all lined up, made a crease, and now we've got a circle with 4 perfect locations. So all we need to do now is put the cone back on the circle, hold it there, and we draw a line on each one, and that gives us our starting point. So then what we'll do is we'll start with the star set up to that line, trace it out, set the star up to that line, trace it out, and that gives us our cutout template for the cone. So the cone is all cut and actually fits perfect. I didn't have to make any adjustments to it. That's awesome. So we test fit it, and the stock bolt that comes with it is way too long. So it was threaded to that spot right there. You may be able to see a bit of a difference in the thread color, but it was right to the end of my finger. So we actually made more threads all the way down to here, which will allow us to get that turned on as much as possible. So, all right guys, the exhaust, the cowl, the nose cone, the prop is all installed, and boy does that ever look good. Everything worked out really well. This is a huge step. I was really worried about this stuff, but it's done. The exhaust is great. I love how this fits in there. We will probably paint these chrome and put some black paint on the inside just to give it a nice little effect, but that looks really good. Nose cone turned out awesome. And this one over here on the left side of the plane in the pilot's position is a little bit shorter. Now, it would be nice if this was longer. Downside is though, to get this cowl off, you have to pull this side off first and pop it over. So if this was any longer, you'd really have to reef on that. So it's probably best that it's a little bit shorter, so I get that, but boy, that looks good. So we're gonna pop this off because we need to flip the plane upside down to work on it. All right, so we've got all of our labels made up here in our Dymo printer for shrink tubing, so we'll get those printed. And I like to do these as batches so we don't waste as much as possible, or we minimize the amount of waste. As you can see there, we've got all of our labels to go on our servo lead ends. So we've done our wiring harnesses up here for the wings. Now obviously, like I've talked about previously, we have two different Ashlock connector combinations, so there's no way to mess this up when you're putting the wings on. And we've got our other ends installed here, which are all labeled as well. So now what we'll do is we'll get these wiring harnesses installed in the fuselage, and that will be a big step completed in the wiring section. So we're getting into the finer details here on the Strega. I cut a piece of carbon laminated plywood, and this is 1/8 ply with carbon on both sides. And this is the way that I'm starting to mount my Cortexes for a while now. So we'll add 4 screw holes into here, and we'll screw this down in the aircraft. Makes removing these really easy. And so we've got that stuck to the board, and we need to install the Cortex and the Electron controller in the aircraft. So we got most of the wiring figured out here. The one downside to this plane, obviously, with that permanent tray is we can't really hide the wires, but what I did here when I designed this was we tuck all the excess down there, so it actually is going to look nice and clean when we're done. We're going to zip tie everything together and make it nice and pretty. So a few things left to do in between the Cortex and our switches and stuff here, but we got pretty much the gist of it run. So I'm just going to finish up these last little bits here. We won't be able to obviously hook the battery up here until we find where we're putting the battery based on our CG. But we need to run the extensions for these two guys now into the ports. It's another little update here. It may not look like much has gotten done, but all of our wiring is now installed. We've got our primary receiver right there at the end of my finger. We're using a secondary clone receiver right there. E1 and E2 on the secondary receiver are set up as bus outputs. So one of those lines goes into the primary receiver. One of those lines, the other one goes into the central box. So we've got a redundant receiver system there, and then we've got a 900 on that side, the other side over there, and we've got our remote on-off switch right in the center of the screen, right there. So that is our setup. What we're going to do now is go through our servo wiring and clean everything up, zip tie everything, and make her look pretty. All right, now we're doing the CG on this aircraft. We've got it upside down. We've got everything pretty much installed. And there's some important things on the CG of the P51/Strega. So we've got two 2550 milliamp batteries hanging out in the tail here. Those would be our receiver packs. We're probably going to be sharing the ignition power from one of these packs, and then we'll share the landing gear power from one of these packs as well too. So the only extra battery we're going to be adding is going to be for the ignition. So that we can use for our final position on CG, and we don't really know what battery we need yet. So this is kind of a preliminary setup. We've got our cowl just sitting there. I don't have the cowl installed because it would get damaged if it's sitting on the stand. Now, some important things here. So the CARF manual, the P51 manual, says that the CG should be at the leading edge of the wing tube. So the leading edge of the wing tube is where this rope is coming out right here. And there's a black Sharpie mark. Now, CARF has sent some pictures on some of the forums on RC Universe and such, with some updated pictures very recently over the past couple years. And they're saying that the CG should be at 6 inches from the leading edge of the wing to fuselage joint, so right here. So their picture actually shows it 6 inches back from this point, and that's where we've measured right here. So 6 inches back is right there. I've also put a mark for 6.5 just in case, but 6 inches is what we're going to be shooting for right in that location. So I've just put a wire underneath this is all carbon fiber and plywood, so it's going to be able to lift the aircraft no problem. I'm just going to lift this up and check it. So we're at 6 inches like I mentioned, and we'll see how everything looks. There we go. So we are perfectly balanced at the 6 inch mark with those 2 batteries sitting in the tail. So hands are off, and that's where we're balanced. So the reason I wanted to use the hanging method is it's a lot more simple with this plane. It's a bit of a mystery with this P51 or Strega or Reno Racer. The manual is not 100%. There's a little bit of information online, so people haven't really shared this openly or in a very simple to find location. So that's why we're doing the hanging method. We will also be putting it on our RC CG machine. Banner's up there. And we'll be doing that as well too, because we have a special tail dragger set up for that, that tool. So now that we know we are good with those 2 batteries in the tail, our ignition battery really needs to go over top of the CG location or really close to it, which is good. That's positive because we can easily take that battery in and out with the wings off. We'll have good access back there for our tail section with our 2 receiver batteries, and we don't have to try and jam another battery back here because this section is already very tight. And that gives us our final setup here. So now we can run those power lines, make up our power leads that go to the front and feed everything. All right, so we basically have spent the entire day wiring things up, and we are done. I've got the 2 batteries installed here. We use Dean's connectors because they're small. That is the key to this area. It is very tight, and the Dean's connectors are the smallest connectors that are high current that we can get, and it will be just fine. So we've got our lines coming there. They're CA'd to the side of the wall so they won't interfere with the leg. So we've got 2 batteries back here. Take the batteries out, you undo the cover plate, and you have exposure to the batteries. We've got a plate mounted right there for our starter battery. Now I did hook up the 3-cell and it does turn the engine over, so fingers crossed that this little guy will work just fine. I think now that we've got a good connector set up and everything, it's going to be just perfect. So, which is also good because we've got a nice battery here that doesn't add a lot of weight, and it's just a nice simple location. We can unplug it or take it out from the hatch as well. So there's the final wiring. It's a bit of a mess, but it works, and it's functional. We're gonna not do any of our goop on any of our connectors yet. We're just gonna leave everything, and that'll be one of our final cleanup steps. But that's pretty much it, guys. So actually getting this plane together is fairly simple. You take the wing and you put it together in this type of format. You install the wing on the airplane, and then you've got really good access to both ash lock connectors. So these guys here just come up, we plug them in, and then we just close the wing together, and we're good. So what we're gonna do now is we are going to get the wing on the plane. We're getting very close to doing our test run up of this thing. Okay, so wing bolts, I talked about those being too long before. So what I did was I took my tap and die set, I cut about another 3/4 inch of new threads, and then I cut about 1/2 inch off the bolt. And now these are set and good to bolt the wings on. All right, guys, we have the Strega on the ground and she looks beautiful. I think we're ready to test run this thing. We've put about 3/4 of a tank of fuel in there. So that's done. We closed the vent off here. We added 4 PSI pressure, or 206 millimeters of mercury pressure into the fuel system. So our pop bottle back here is now pressurized. The tank is pressurized. And I think we're ready to run the aircraft. All right, so before we do our test runs on the aircraft, we want to get our prop all balanced and finished. Probably should have done this before when we did the test run of the engine, but we're gonna get it all fixed up now. So first thing I've done here is we've taken the prop apart and we've weighed each of the blades on our very accurate gram scale here. So what happened was, we've got some blades that are like 119.5 and then some blades that are 120.5. So I actually had 2 heavier blades here and 2 lighter blades there. So I flipped them around and now we've got a 120.5, 120.5, 119.5, 119.5. And I'll just show you here. There's an example right there, 120.7. So now our blades are balanced fairly closely together. So now we'll go on to the next step. So we've reassembled the prop. We've used our jig to make sure all of our blades are set up properly. And we'll Loctite all of our bolts now. So I've got all the outer ones tightened up, and we'll Loctite the inner one, then we'll do each of the outer ones. Once those are all Loctited, then we'll recheck all of our blades. For balancing a prop like this, we're gonna do it as a cross pattern. And what I do, I don't have any fancy tools or machines or anything. I just take a nice long Allen key like this, put 2 bearings on it. The bearings don't fit in the holes properly, which is fine. I just put one on one side, one on the other side, and that reduces the resistance on the prop, so you can find out which side is heavier. Also, thank you, Dave Wilshire, if you're watching this, for the information on these props. What Dave's comment was from the tip, the blades are hollow around 25 millimeters from each tip. So about 1 inch in, it'll start to get hollow here. So he drills a tiny little hole, like a 3 millimeter hole, and then a 1 millimeter hole next to it. And that allows the air to escape. And then we're just going to inject high sol into the prop itself. So what we're doing here is, I've already had this on the little balance tool. One of our blades is heavier, so crosswise, like for example, these 2 blades balance out perfect. And then if we go like this blade is heavy, this blade is light. So we're going to inject some high sol into the light blade to get that balanced out. So I'll just show you guys what it looks like here. So we'll get our bearings put in. So as of right now, these 2 that are on the horizontal plane are fairly balanced. And if we go like this and check this direction, you'll see that that blade drops. And we come back. So we're going to mark the top blade, which is our lighter blade. And we are going to add some weight to this one. Okay, so we've added a bunch of weight to the light tip there, and we are perfect. I actually had to use a washer on that tip to make up enough weight. And then now with our other blades, this blade that I'm holding right now is a little bit heavy. So now that we're close on the first pair, this pair needs a bit of adjustment. So we're going to add a little bit of tape to the one that I'm holding and get it balanced this direction as well. I don't think it'll need very much, so we'll just take it nice and slow. But yeah, this first one here needed to add like multiple layers of tape, and then I ended up putting a washer on there, more layers of tape, and we will weigh those pieces to see how much we actually need. Okay, so this one hardly needed anything. It's like 2 pieces of masking tape, so really not much at all. So we're balanced there. And we're balanced there. All right, so we've drilled a 3mm or 1/8 hole there, a 1mm hole there, and we will inject high sol into this hole to get her balanced. All right, so there we go. We've injected our high sol there. What I did was I actually put the piece of tape on the gram scale, and just to get an idea of how much 3.5 grams is, or whatever number we needed. So a full pump on the injector or the mixer handle here was like 2.5 grams. So what I did was I did a full pump, checked it, and then started adding small amounts to it. But that is that's about 2.5 grams of high sol. And for this, we're using 5-minute high sol. This is a great application for this type of thing because we want it to get in there, set up quickly, and be done. So we're really close right now. We're a little, just a touch heavy on this side, like I'm talking about micrograms. So I'm gonna let this set up here. This is the little bit that's kind of oozing out, and then we will just chop that off with an X-Acto and we will be bang on. I'm not gonna do a hole on this one. I'm probably just gonna use a little bit of clear coat on the back of this blade because our amount that we need here is just so minor. I mean, it's 2 pieces of masking tape, so it's pretty much nothing. All right, so we're ready to test run the engine. Now, I will tell you that our live is going on right now while we're doing this at the lighter side of RC After Dark. They got to see 2 test runs on the live feed. This is actually the 3rd run that we're showing you guys that are watching the video. So probably a good idea to go over to the lighter side of RC After Dark and hit that subscribe button. There's a link down below. And ready to go. All right, so just going through the list of things here and making some adjustments. So that last test run, I didn't have my throttle servo set up properly. So what was happening was the first half of the throttle travel wasn't doing anything to the servo. And then I'd get to the halfway point, it would be really steep curve. So what had happened was I reduced one of the endpoints down to 0. The max was up to like 100. Our trim was at 0, so it was just because of that offset it wasn't working properly. But now I'll start off at the bottom and I'm moving that throttle servo up, and we've got movement throughout the entire range. So I've played with that, so it should be a lot more adjustable and better. I was kind of wondering on that last test run what was going on. So all right guys, so the goal here is we're going to start the engine up and we're going to do some tuning on this engine. So we've got our linkage all bettered up for our throttle servo, which should be hopefully way better now. So the first thing I'm going to adjust is the throttle position for the low end. And I'm just taking a look at the fuel line as we're have the engine choked here. Choke off. right, guys, so we've got all the little details inside the aircraft all wrapped up. So we had the wings off, got everything plugged in, got everything kind of finalized on the inside. We do still have to goop all of our connectors, but I'm saving that for a last step. So we've got our flaps plugged in now, all of our travels are adjusted. So I'll show you exactly what we did for our travels. So we're using the P51 manual travels. So we've got aileron 1/2 inch up and down, elevator 3/4 inch up, 1/2 inch down, rudder 2 inches, and flaps 15 degrees, which is adjustable. The 45 is preset by the linkage setup. So that is what we're using on the aircraft. So we've got a couple things left to do. Number one, we've got to install our decals, our decals, which are all right here. Now I think I'm gonna install all of them. I'm gonna pull up some scale pictures of the Strega and kind of take a look at things, but this is one of our next big steps that we need to do. This is the kit that was supplied with the Strega, and it was shipped separately with the kit. It wasn't included with the kit, came in a separate delivery. So we've got to do the decals next, decals, sorry. We've got to program the gyro. Now I did run a lead to our startup board, so we can actually program the gyro without the wing being taken off and the aircraft is upright. And then we've got to goop all of our connections when we're done. That's a last step. And then we're going to build a stand out of our random heli parts for this aircraft. So cracking along. If there's anything special about the decals, I will show you guys, but pretty straightforward. We're just gonna put those on all the scale locations. Oh, and I did run a vent line right there. Keep in mind this vent line's not active when the aircraft is running, so it's a 4mm Festo line. This is just simply to bleed off excess pressure from the pressure system, and also while you're filling for fuel to drain out. So you know when the tank's full. All right, so the kit comes with a few different iterations of the Strega. So here's all the other versions that they've had. The sponsors basically stay very similar, so that stuff doesn't change, but the overall changes. So I went with a Lucas Oil scheme. I think it's awesome looking. I like it. That's why we went with it. But we are done all of the decals. Looks really good. So we're gonna do one more run up on this thing. We still have fuel left in the tank. I've pressurized the tank. Let's start her up. And this will be the first startup with the cowl on, the hatches on the bottom. We've got our cooling baffles reinstalled. So right now this is in flying condition. All right, aircraft is on. Chokes on. All right, guys, well, that wraps up the build of the CARF Strega Reno Racer. I am extremely excited to see this thing fly. What an absolute treat it has been to build this aircraft. It is beautiful. A couple of the final things that we're going to be doing. So when we take the wings off to dismantle this aircraft, we're going to goop all the connectors. That's normal procedure. And then we're going to be putting it on our random heli stand, and then it's ready to go. So there's still some engine tuning to do at the field on maiden day. We got to do a range check, of course, a couple taxi runs, things like that. So just the normal stuff, but looking forward to it. So thanks guys for tuning into the build series. If you have any questions or comments, don't forget to list them down below. Additionally, we did a lot of this build on the lighter side of RC after dark, or little segments of it. And if you guys aren't subscribed to the lighter side of RC after dark, there's a link down below to my other page. And we do live feeds from the shop here once a week is the plan, and usually it's a couple weeks ahead of these videos that get released on the main channel, so you get to see some little tidbits. This engine run-up that you saw in this video was actually live about 2 weeks ago on the lighter side of RC after dark, so definitely head over there and check it out. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.